putting together is sometimes on formulation or on combination of products, or on the delivery device itself. So, so tech transfer of, and by the way, we're here today not only because of COVID. We're not talking about the transfer of the COVID vaccines manufacturing process to manufacturers. We're talking, generally speaking, on building vaccines capabilities, manufacturing capabilities, release testing capabilities, the long term. The there are critical ingredients for companies to transfer, to be motivated to transfer technology to anyone else, including to manufacturers in Africa. So you need 6 important ingredients. Otherwise, technology transfer will remain a will, not followed by action. The first one is government policies. When a company finds government policies that are encouraging investments locally, the local industry, I think that's the requirement number one. The number two is the regulatory environment within the, and I've heard this before, within the country. You don't have solid regulatory environments that accelerates tech transfer, help tech transfers. We don't have, if a tech transfer of a product to a country in Africa would take 2 years just to register the product, it's completely demotivating for anyone to transfer technology. So that's the number two, which is critical. And this is why the African Union has to work together so that there's a framework of regulatory, at least there are some of the basics, and there's no country to country significant differences. So the regulatory framework is absolutely critical. Third one is you need to have a solid industry. You need to have the receiver to receive the IP or to receive the innovation or the tech transfer. If there's no solid receiver, the giver, you're not going to get anyone motivated to transfer technology. So I think the receiver, the industry, is really important. Number 4 is the talent. I don't think Africa is missing talents to manufacture vaccines, although it's complex to do that. I think the talent, I do believe that Africa has the talent to be able to manufacture vaccines or biologics, or even more complex biologics. Number 5 is the giver, and then number 6 is the receiver in this big picture. I think if we continue to rely on the giver goodwill to transfer technology into Africa, we're going to be sitting here for the next 20 years again, talking exactly about the same thing. It didn't happen in the last 20 years. And I don't think we're going to learn the lessons out of this pandemic. It takes incentives more than just goodwill and doing something good for Africa for the giver to be able to transfer technology. And those incentives, I think the government can be very creative to facilitate and enable tech transfer to Africa, especially for technology that has no IP. The vast majority of vaccines in Africa today have no IP. They're available for tech transfer. Anyone in Africa today can, with funds, can manufacture PCV13 vaccine, or can manufacture most of the influenza vaccine. So I'm hearing a lot of the pharma willing to transfer technology to Africa, but then you need these 5 ingredients. And as I said, the top one is regulatory environments. With no regulatory environments, there will be, even with the money, there will be no incentive to transfer technology as complex as vaccines. So I mean, we have to be pragmatic here. We have to change the game completely. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here just talking. There's a lot of people that have a lot of goodwill. If we don't change the game completely and we have a roadmap where we have a solid supply chain and value within different African countries to be able to build vaccines and biologics capabilities across the continent, it's not going to happen. So to be able to do that, I would suggest that under the leadership of the African Union and the CDC, that this does not stop as a couple of days conference, but that we put people together between the industry, government, African CDC, different United Nations agencies, and industry outside and inside within Africa to be able to reflect on with a true action plan on how to transfer technology of vaccines that have no IP into them. So there's no hostile environment when there's no IP between the receiver and and the giver. I just wanted to share these with you very pragmatically.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Samir Macho, and I must apologize for taking you out at this late hour, midnight. We are very sorry about it, but we appreciate your contribution all the more because of how determined you have been to be with us, to join us. You have shared with us real gems, very, very interesting practical experience, which will actually help us as we go along. So we want to move on then. At this point, I'd like to bring to the fore Dr. Maria Angela Batista Galvao-Simao, and then Dr. Abdoulaye Sabre Fadul to come in. The aspect we're focusing on is enablers for IP sharing to Africa, notwithstanding what has been said, but nevertheless, we still believe that we need to thresh this topic out. There are all tech transfer mechanisms, as you have indicated, that have been historically used, and newer mechanisms employed in the COVID-19 vaccine, race building vaccine in the COVID-19 vaccine race. And building capacity would also benefit African pharmaceutical development. And so what I'd like you to look at it, what are the mechanisms, what mechanisms could multilateral organizations leverage to facilitate IP sharing in Africa post-COVID-19, and which organizations are most capable to assist in incentivizing this? And how important is a country's regulatory environment for IP transfer? And how can African government enable the IP transfer for vaccine and the incentives that could be provided? I think we're getting to, to a point where we're going to be dealing with similar issues. But I think your varied experience is going to help us. So Dr. Maria Angela Batista Galvao-Simao, if you could come on for about 5 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, and let me thank the organizers for the invite for WTO to speak. About the mechanism, Minister, yeah, we have several mechanisms existing already. There are WHO World Health Assembly resolutions on access, several of them, right? We have a roadmap on access to medicines and vaccines. We have the Global Strategy and Plan of Action on Public Health, Innovation, Intellectual Property, which was approved in 2008 and reviewed in 2018, I think. And last, but we had the 2019 resolution on transparency of pricing and markets, which can all help us. And this year, it's been discussed a resolution on local production. So this all comes together, plus WHO, and we already heard a colleague from UNCTAD, but WHO does work very closely with WTO and WIPO on trying to find convergences between innovation, intellectual property, and in public health interests. Not easy, but we produce, we have a trilateral cooperation, and we do work together, trying to find ways to agree on what we can push forward as member states organizations. And let me also, we all know that competition is very good to promote affordable access and also to increase equity in access, and the HIV is the best example of that. But what we are living in is in a context where we have a limited supply products coupled with a very concentrated manufacturing capacity. We see it's getting better, but it's still very concentrated. We have exclusive or limited patent licenses. We have lack of transparency in the agreements or the provisions of this license. And we have potentially restrictive conditions that could prevent wide scale up in manufacturing, especially in low and middle income countries. And WHO is actually pushing very hard for countries to explore all avenues, all mechanisms, and that include voluntary license, technology pools, use of TRIPS flexibilities, and includes, and our Director General has been very explicit about it, a very strong support to the waiver of certain intellectual property provisions and market exclusivity. This is at the center stage right now. Maybe it will take longer to negotiate than what we need right now, but it's brought to the table and it's being negotiated, and it's a South African and India proposal, as everyone knows. But WHO, at the same time, as we work to CETA, to Act A, Solidarity Trial, COVAX facility, we also strongly calling funders in industry to facilitate sharing patent know-how and data to the COVID technology access pool, which we call CETAP, which was launched by WHO and the president of Costa Rica, together with 40 other countries, to promote an open science where licensing through the medicines patent pool could occur voluntarily, but in a non-exclusive, transparent manner to leverage as much manufacturing capacity as possible. But we do have, from a practical perspective, I have to agree with some things that were said earlier today, because we need to highlight the different impact that IP and the various TRIPS flexibility can have on access to vaccines compared to medicine. So the time for us to look at this with a cold mind and see how we can advance this agenda. Because we know very well how to do small molecules, and we know very well how to have a generic drug that can be produced, and the countries don't have difficulty in accessing. They can negotiate a license, or they can do a compulsory license. We know less. We learned that a lot through HIV again, right? But we know less about the impact on this on the vaccines, and this is where forums like this are extremely helpful for us to have more collective clarity on the way ahead, because the biologics are more complex, right? And I'm saying this because we have dealt in the past with the issues of the complexities of biosimilars, for example, which is also something that we need to increase access, and we need to increase manufacturing capacity around the world, because it's different from a small molecule, because it's not just the composition, right? Each vaccine is require, for example, access to cell lines or virus strains, and they may be proprietary, right? And access to these reagents may only be obtained either if you're going to start from scratch, it's going to take a long time. So ideally, it has to be obtained through the manufacturer. And how do you measure that? How do you put that in place in a way that countries can negotiate and can do shortcuts in the vaccine production? And I think it was mentioned today as well that the successful technology transfer, we need technology transfer, right? Otherwise, it's going to take too long. How do you manage the process so that at the same time that countries have the increased political will to do it, there's also a substantive technology transfer behind it, and there is agreements that the licensing agreements are transparent, and they are public health oriented, right? They are access friendly. So let me say, and I think you have already heard Richard Hatchett, I think from CEPI, he spoke today, with WHO and CEPI with other stakeholders are leading a manufacturing plan that has, for vaccines, that has short, mid, and long term. And we are building a lot on the long term, on the experiences from the pandemic influenza, right? The vaccine production for pandemic influenza. And one thing that needs to be taken into account, that when we're setting up vaccine manufacturing in Africa or elsewhere, that's lessons learned from the pandemic influenza. It's critical that the mechanism established in sure that the market's not only national, that you can serve the regional market. And lastly, Minister, I would like to say that this is an enabler. We need to think of the regulatory environment as an enabler, right? And we need to couple the strengthening of the national regulatory systems with the vaccine or any health products production. And this is super important, not only for the use in the national level, but also for regional and achieving international markets. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mariangela. Thank you very much. Once again, a good experience from WHO. May I now invite my colleague, the Minister, His Excellency Dr. Abdoulaye Saleh Fadul, Public Health Minister from Chad, to share with us, his experience on these issues. Thank you very much. Honorable Minister. Oh, I believe the minister may not be online. We will come back later. Let's move to the next question. I'd like the next two panelists to look at the issue from this perspective of the role of the TRIPS and ACFTA in the enabling of the trade flexibilities and incentives. The agreement on the trade-related aspects of intellectual property, TRIPS, is a major trade-related agreement that allows members of the World Trade Organization to protect intellectual property. So what is TRIPS and how does it affect the intellectual property and tech transfer? And how has TRIPS impacted on the African pharmaceutical development? And how can CFTA be leveraged to enable the IP transfer on tech transfers on the continent? I think we have heard as well the real issue that we need to make sure that not only the African continent, but the coordination across member states so that the regulatory environment is more or less comparable. So may we ask Dr. Liv Franzen to come in. Welcome, Madam.
Good evening, everybody. It's also late. I'm in India for the moment, so it's also late here, but not as late as in Korea. But I want to congratulate, before saying anything, I really followed the whole conference and I think this is an amazing, and I'm sure it's going to be a historic event. And I hope it's a start of a real change. So congratulations to the African Union and the African CDC, and specifically also to John Kengeson. Now you posing a difficult question. But first of all, I mean, we have good news that only after 1 year since the COVID epidemic started, we have very few effective vaccines and millions already vaccinated, including myself. And we are now in a similar situation than I was in 20 years ago with HIV and AIDS. And I find that really sad. Millions of people in wealthy nations are protected, and millions are waiting in Africa and other countries, including here in India, for similar access. This is unacceptable, and I'm really congratulating and hope that this initiative really will make a change that we were not able to make with HIV/AIDS. The tests, the bed nets, the drugs took for a long time to be available, but also for a long time not even to be produced in Africa. At that stage, India took over also in producing. At that stage, we said it was not possible for India to do so. Now they are the biggest producer of vaccines worldwide. So today, the problem is different from the perspective that the scale that we need to manufacture something quickly has never been at that stage, at that level. So for the moment, the bottleneck is manufacturing, and therefore this conference is really to the point. But sadly, in the last decades, very few manufacturing capacities have been developed in Africa, despite the fact that the last 2 decades, manufacturing became more affordable and feasible, as India, Brazil, South Africa, China have demonstrated. and Africa could demonstrate and will demonstrate that also. A year ago already, we proposed, Dr. John Kengason and myself, we proposed several initiatives already to increase manufacturing before even the vaccines became available. And I think if we had pushed that at that stage with bigger investments possible, it could have been changed the given already. So is protection of IP rights of COVID vaccine producers as defined under the TRIPS agreement critical to improve access and equity? The TRIPS agreement, or the management of IPR for pharma products, has been a sensitive issue since long. I've been involved in the Doha discussions when I was a director in the European Commission with Commissioner Lamy. Actually, since the creation of the World Trade Organization in '95, since then, all of the members of the WTO are required to adopt patent laws that comply with the TRIPS agreement. The developed members at that stage of the WTO argued that the mandatory protection of pharma products will provide necessary incentives for pharma innovation. In the contrast, the developing countries argued that enacting patent laws that comply with TRIPS may restrict production of local industries and increase price, and we are still there. We did a little step forward under the Doha agreement that I was involved in, with arguing for exceptions for specifically the public health emergency exceptions. And of course, we are highly in a public health emergency exception at this stage. We've also agreed a little later a waiver for protection of patent laws for the LDCs. Therefore, the LDCs can buy and produce generic medicines at a lower price than branded equivalents. Governments can issue compulsory licensing for generic production in the public interest. Several countries have done so, but not yet for COVID. But further improvements on the TRIPS agreement are indeed necessary. Today, the global campaign is seeking exemption of COVID-19 vaccines from IP protection, arguing that this action would mobilize additional manufacturers. Others argue again that doing so would dissuade additional manufacturing investments and undermine long-run vaccine developments. This is a very valuable debate that should be pursued within WTO, and with the new leadership of the WTO and the initiatives of the African Union and the African CDC, I believe that that will come to a clear further clarification. The African Free Trade Agreement is very critical in this also for the moment. As a united coherent bloc that should strengthen Africa's ability to ensure TRIPS flexibilities. It is important that AfCFTA is compatible with TRIPS and ensures the flexibilities used and simplifies the use of this. I, however, argue that the current imperative to scale existing vaccines as quickly as possible while maintaining
I'm sorry, it looks like we might be having a connection problem with Dr. Franson. We'll pick up the last, well,
I have the impression that I have been cut off.
Would you just like to summarize and just round up at this point?
I'm still online.
I'm sorry, we're going to have to move on.
Am I still online?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Franson. That really was very, very helpful. Thank you very much. We will proceed now to take the last panelist. Will Dr. Franson?
Yes. I think I've been disconnected. I don't know if you hear me.
I can hear you. I'll just give you about 30 seconds to round up. I'll give you about half a minute.
Okay, I don't know what you, I think you have been cut off, but okay, I will finalize that because all of it and evidence suggests that the current constraint to global access is capacity, not legal structures. I think as strictures. I think therefore knowledge sharing and tech transfer are the crux of the IP issues, not patents and legal structures for the most. Congratulate the African Union, and I hope that the proposal will remain on this aspect in the G20 and the T20 will also boost this initiative. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the problem.
No, thank you very much. We have got most of the gist of what you said, and we really appreciate all your experience. And again, thank you for staying up to join us. Very, very important that we hear your experience. Let's now invite His Excellency Wamgele Mene, Secretary General of the AFCTFA. If you could come in, thank you very much, Excellency. Okay, well, I'm not sure, maybe because His Excellency was already in the earlier session. I think we still all recall his input, which was pretty much on the same lines. So we would at this point take the issues from here. I believe that we have gone through most of our panelists. Let me check if the Minister, Public Health Minister from Chad, Excellency Dr. Abdoulaye Sabrel Fadul is in yet. Okay, it doesn't seem as though he is in. So at this point, I think we're going to try and round up. We are going to be rounding up at this point. So I'm going to invite my co-moderator, Professor Sarah Anyong-Agbor, to come in and just give reflections on this discussion. A very difficult task to do, considering the very wide experience and very deep lessons that have come from this session, very enriching inputs that have come forth. And I really do appreciate the fact that we have had this very distinguished panel that has been sharing all this experience with us. I think from here, there are a few practical things that will be able to take us forward, where we move from the discussion to concrete actions, and that has come out quite clearly. So, Excellency Prof. Sarah Anyong-Agbor, let me give you the difficult task of having to try and synthesize this and put it all together. Thank you very much, my sister. You're on the floor.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I want to say thank you very much to all our panelists. It's been an insightful session. From the very beginning, where we started with our brother, Mr. Elias Biaglen, on the question on intellectual property importance for production, the challenges for African countries to access IP on vaccines. It stated that there is lack of sufficient capacity among the recipients, and this again was also stated by the last speaker, and that we underscore the importance of IP access, and African manufacturers, if they do not have this, they will find it difficult to join the international scene. And the third thing he mentioned was that the technologies might not find it productive to work with African manufacturers. Therefore, Africa needs to acquire new knowledge, improve their investment framework, and collaboration with IT institutions. He underscored the need to invest in new technologies for vaccine production. Manufacturers, African manufacturers having what he calls a triangular relationship in order to acquire the know-how. So most of the IP, the intellectual property for vaccines developed from public funding. So Africa needs also to participate in it, particularly bringing their financial institutions into this. From there, we move on to the critical factors that need to come together to transfer IP to African vaccine manufacturers. One of the major points stated was that we need to collaborate. There is a need for scaling up of vaccine production, which is important, but again, it is also important to note that IP is an enabler, a topping of the icing on the cake, as it was put, and that we need to create a win-win context. Competence of the recipients, joint training for scaling up, and we need to move for technological transfer. And still on this topic, on factors that will compel tech transfer to African manufacturers, Dr. Sam mentioned 6 important factors. 1, government policy. 2, the right environment to enable technology transfer. Hence, that we have to work on the regulatory framework. 3, solid industries or solid receivers. 4, talent. And he said Africa does not lack this talent. And then the giver, and 6, the receiver. So we must have incentives from the government that can attract the giver to transfer this technology. And there must be a game change in the way we perceive this, because we need a good roadmap, a good supply chain across the continent for it to happen. So he also advised that African Union CDC to not stop this conversation, but create a task force that will follow up on the full action plan to transfer technology within Africa. Now, what are the enablers for IP sharing for Africa? What are the mechanisms that manufacturing companies will leverage on? And Dr. Maria Angela gave us some answers on some of those mechanisms already existing from the point of view of WHO. That's resolutions on access equity, the resolutions on access, equity in access, and then the global structure on IP. She mentioned the 2019 resolution on vaccine and markets. Then she spoke about exclusive patent licenses, and then promotion of an open science in a transparent, accountable manner. And then we need to think of an enabling environment. It's very important. Then she also highlighted on sharing of know-how, best practices, experience sharing. And then she also mentioned the need for technology transfer, which must be a substantive technology transfer. And from here, we went on the role of TRIPS and after agreement. What is TRIPS and how does it impact on IP? And we said that IP rights on TRIPS agreement. There is a global campaign that is seeking exemption for some of these intellectual property rights. Then the African trade agreement is important to TRIPS, so that we can scale up existing importance. So at the end of the day, we found out that the place of intellectual property in vaccine manufacturing is very important. And one of the ways of manufacturing of scale is also to make sure we have the security of intellectual property. So the African manufacturers need a dedicated technology transfer from the manufacturer with the existing know-how to ensure end product bioequivalence transfer. And then tech transfer is a major potential to all these CVMs. So one of the 5 potential incentives which have successfully enabled technology in other geographies, as we write in the concept note, is the contracting terms, and that comes under the intellectual property. So manufacturers will form a shared IP ownership structure with funders who have incentives to support African manufacturing or make IP public support. Then the African manufacturing or make IP public again. So the TRIPS flexibility could allow third-party contracting and vaccine-related IP. So these are the things we have discussed, and we have seen that there's just no way we can talk about this vaccine manufacturing in Africa without also considering the intellectual property. And that is why I mentioned that in 2016, the African Union member states adopted the Pan-African Intellectual Property Organization as one of its own specialized agency in order to boost this. Of course, we have the different bodies that come from the Francophonie and the Commonwealth on different IP sectors in Africa. So that is what I've been able to sum up, Excellency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much. You've done a brilliant job. I think the moral of the whole discussion, the message is that nothing stops Africa from going on to start a manufacturing program of its own. Not even IP is the limiting factor. There is a whole lot of what Africa already have, and therefore we need to focus on that. And I think that the suggestion that we need to get the AU team, Africa CDC, to put together a team to start moving from this discussion, all of us agree. This has been a historic conversation, and it really opens up a lot of ways for us to move into the future. With that, I want to then take this opportunity to thank all our distinguished panelists and all for their very elaborate inputs. And I want to thank particularly those who are in South Korea, in India, for braving the night and be with us at this very difficult time for them. But we really appreciate everything. At this point, we want to move forward with a lot more hope than any sense of uncertainty that Africa has got a future in the manufacturing of vaccines, and everything is really in our hands. Thank you very much. Our session is closed. Thanks, bye.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dr. Zweli Mkhize. Thank you, Your Excellency Sarah Anyang Agbor, for that wonderful session. Intellectual property transfer is not usually a very easy topic to talk about, because about everybody has an opinion on it. And I'm happy that you've managed to keep to your time slot, despite the difficulty of talking about that particular subject. I would like to introduce the next session. This is a ministerial panel session, which happens to be the last panel of the day, and it is deliberately designed to give a chance to ministers of in different governments to talk to us about current gaps, potential opportunities, and short to long-term solutions for African leaders to unlock the enabling environment for vaccine manufacturing in Africa. In other words, it's a session that will help us appreciate what the responsibility bearers are trying to do in order to unlock the potential for large-scale manufacture of vaccines. Also, they will talk about roles and responsibilities for countries and regional economic communities or regional economic blocks. To take us through this session, we have now this time round, it's a womanel, not a manel. Our two co-moderators are Honorable Dr. Leah Tadesse, who is the Minister of Health, the Federal Republic of Ethiopia. Dr. Leah Tadesse was appointed as minister in March 2020. Prior to this appointment, she served as Ethiopia's State Minister of Health since November 2018, leading to the national health programs under the Health Sector Transformation Strategy. Our second co-host is Honorable Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, Minister for Finance, Budget and National Planning of the Republic of Nigeria. Prior to her current role as minister, the Honorable Dr. Zainab Ahmed served as the Minister of State for Budget and National Planning. She previously served as the Executive Secretary and National Coordinator of the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. And this session will last 1 hour 15 minutes. So I would like to ask all of us to sit in and listen to this interministerial panel for the next 1 hour 15 minutes, and we will close at exactly East African time at exactly 8. Thank you very much, and I would like to hand over to Dr. Zainab and Dr. Leah Tadesse. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miota, and greetings, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished participants of this final session of the day. I would like to start by really acknowledging first the African Union and the African CDC for today's conference on this crucial topic of Africa's vaccine manufacturing for health security. And I'm honored to co-moderate this final ministerial roundtable with Honorable Dr. Zainab Ahmed, Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning for the Republic of Nigeria. And this session, as was introduced earlier, will focus on country incentives to encourage advancing vaccine manufacturing in Africa. The need to have such a capacity in terms of both the facility and the expertise in the African continent is definitely apparent with this COVID-19 pandemic and the shortage of vaccine to satisfy the global needs that has caused African countries to remain behind in securing the needed vaccines has made it much more timely. And our envisioned new public health order to safeguard the health and economic security of our continent cannot rely on others but on Africa itself. So today, in the last 4 sessions, several issues have been addressed and highlighted across the continent that could prevent local vaccine manufacturing to be realized even in the long term. It's starting from an agenda setting and coordination perspective that no current unified and operational continental strategy is witnessed, and there is unclear ownership and roles of stakeholders. On the regulatory side, a continent-wide harmonization is also not yet implemented under the Africa Medicines Agency, and regional harmonization not yet expanded to joint approval of vaccines. And our national regulators, as we all know, are facing capacity and capability constraints. Demand certainty also appears to be one of the highest barriers to overcome, with low demand volumes and uncertainty, unless for Gavi-supported countries was attested. And these markets require low prices and strict regulatory hurdles. Financing is also another limitation for local manufacturing, primarily due to perceptions of high risk and unclear business case articulation. Skill shortage of pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and industrial talent was also highlighted, driven by scarcity and brain drain of local talent, resulting in reliance of foreign expertise. Infrastructure is definitely an obvious challenge for many countries, including transportation, that can hinder further the possibility of export to local products towards other African countries. So it is clear that it's time for vaccine manufacturing, but it's also time for more collaboration between countries and regional associations to advance these conversations on local vaccine manufacturing. There is political will, but political goodwill is not enough, and it has to be backed up by practical plans and practical actions to achieve this goal. Governments need to sit and really define what is needed to incentivize manufacturing in Africa, in the countries in Africa. And national regulatory agencies also have to design financial sustainability strategies, and new market shaping strategies are needed, which can offtake agreements to secure volumes and de-risk the upfront investments in manufacturing. And while the access to finance does not appear to be a barrier, technical assistance is also needed to strengthen the business plan in order to attract investors. And finally, especially when we talk about capacity, partnerships between universities and the private sector are needed to grow so that we can shape this local know-how in a sustainable way for the long term. So we are really excited to have this roundtable of distinguished ministers of several countries, government leaders, and CSO representatives that will highlight on this critical issue of what incentives are needed by countries deliberately to be in place to move this agenda forward. And Dr. Zainab will be introducing the panelists and facilitating the roundtable, and would like to hand over right now to Honorable Dr. Zainab. Thank you very much.
Leah Tadesse, and also let me say good afternoon to and good day to ministers and all excellencies that are in the meeting today, and especially to our panelists. The task that has been set before us, it's not a very complicated one. It's just to discuss the right type of incentives that have to exist to encourage local vaccine manufacturing and also to bring out the challenges facing the expansion of vaccine manufacturing in our countries. One of the most important lessons that Africa has learned during this COVID-19 pandemic is that we must invest and build our own health systems, particularly in the capacity to manufacture vaccines. The rise of global protectionism, unfortunately, and vaccine nationalism has highlighted the call that must be made and that is rightly being made for Africa to solve its problems. We must find our own solutions. This has led to increased support from African governments, and I'm glad a lot of African countries are rising up to the challenge. And we must look at how Africa can expand its manufacturing capacity, how we must de-risk the environment and remove any bottlenecks that is impeding the invitation that we have been making for investors to come into our countries and manufacture these vaccines in Africa. We have an interesting mix of panelists. We have Dr. Jane Ruth Asane, the Minister of Health of Republic of Uganda, Dr. Jane. Dr. Kwaku Afriye, Minister of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation of the Federal Republic of Ghana. Mr. Alan Maleshe, a Civil Society Board Member of the Global Fund. We also have Mrs. Delese Mimi Darko, Chief Executive Officer, Ghana Food and Drugs Authority. We have Honorable Dr. Abdoulaye Diop Sarr, Minister of Health and Social Action, Republic of Senegal. And we have Dr. Hala Zayad, Minister of Health and Population, Arab Republic of Egypt. And finally, but not the least, Mrs. Margaret Ndomondo Sigondo, Head of Health Program, AUDA, Nepal, South Africa. So a very interesting outline. And I want to move forward very quickly by just setting some of the agenda. One of the key themes that we need to discuss in the panel today is so first of all, some guidelines. I will set out some questions. Panelists have 4 minutes to answer, and I get to come back with maybe one question that gives you another 2 minutes. So please, let's be mindful of the timelines that this panel has. So I want to first of all start by going to Dr. Abdoulaye Diop Sarr, Minister of Health, Senegal. Dr. Abdoulaye, the political will, as indicated by Dr. Leah Tadesse, for vaccine is a key component to long-term success of the industry, especially because individual countries cannot meet the required scale for sustainable vaccine production. What is the current state of national and regional discussions? Is there any common ongoing initiative to advance local vaccine manufacturing in Africa? So this is to you, Dr. Abdoulaye Diop. Is Dr. Abdoulaye Diop Sarr, Minister of Health, Senegal, online? It appears we don't have Dr. Abdoulaye Diop online. So I will just cycle back to Dr. Abdoulaye Diop and move on to the next question that I will take will be to Mr. Alan Maleshe, the Civil Society Board Member of the Global Fund. Mr. Alan, are you in the meeting? Oh yeah, okay, I see you. What is the role of civil society in influencing vaccine manufacturing? What are incentives that government themselves can give to local manufacturers, and how can communities advocate for them? Mr. Allen?
Great, thank you very much, Honorable Dr. Zainab, for having me on this panel. I think communities and civil society have a very important role that they are continuing to play in ensuring that we have efforts to have access to vaccines, but also from an African perspective, be able to look at what can be done to increase local manufacturing. I think the first point we want to put on board is to say that civil society has played an important role in terms of ensuring we have the right legal and policy frameworks to ensure there's access of medicine, there's actually promotion within the regional blocks around issues of local production. And the East African community serves an example where we have laws that allow for pooled procurement among East African members. And I think the first step that needs to be taken to ensure that we address the issue of increasing local manufacturing is to ensure that the laws and policies are coherent. The laws dealing with access to medicine, the laws dealing with innovation, the laws dealing with trade, the laws dealing with competition, the laws dealing with science, the laws dealing with taxation, the laws dealing with industrial policies all need to be in alignment, because our experience as civil society has seen that these laws are not in alignment, and that becomes a big disincentive to someone who may want to start local manufacturing, to someone who may want to set up their company. And as such, we need to have that harmony to complement each other. And that then translates to the conversation among the ministers of health, the ministers of trade, the ministers of finance. And this is not only at a country level, this needs to be at a regional level, and eventually this needs to escalate up all the way to a level that we are looking at things at the African level. And I believe that the role of civil society that we continue to play is that we engage with our lawmakers, we engage with our heads of states, we engage with our cabinet representatives in terms of talking to them to say, look, let's think through this policy, think through this. We bring forward evidence based on the lived experience of either people who are living with HIV that are taking some of these drugs, either dealing with people who are affected by non-communicable diseases. And so we see the role of civil society being very critical, and the African Union, the African CDC should continue moving forward, but putting civil society involved in these conversations, because they bring first-hand experience and they bring real evidence from the ground around how this can actually change people's lives. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. Just a quick follow-up. So as civil society, you interface with governments, you also interface with investors, the private sector. This issue that you said, very important point about the need to ensure coherent laws and that the laws are aligned and regulations are aligned. Can you give us an example, just one, maybe within East Africa, either an example of such alignment of laws, or an example of an alignment that could be done that will really trigger the interest of investors?
Thanks, and I think coming from Kenya, I think I'll give the example of the East African HIV and AIDS Prevention and Management Control Act. And I think the advantage the East African community has as a trade bloc or as a regional bloc is that any law that is adopted by the member states of the East African community is binding among all of them. And so when the law is assented to by all the presidents, it means that it has to be applied in all the countries, and all the countries must then amend or regularize their laws and policies to be in line with what the East African policy is saying. And so the East African HIV Prevention and Management Act actually allows for pooled procurement. It allows for ensuring that countries are able to collaborate and come together to be able to either say, let's set up a manufacturing farm for ARVs or issues relating to HIV in a particular country, and we all rally around it. So I think for me, that comes to the closest of what I have seen or experienced, where countries have tried to come together and put a law together that allows them to be able to realign. But on the converse, we've also seen that even with the alignment of the laws, and especially with issues of ARVs, we have seen a push and pull between issues of health and issues of trade, where we have had counterfeit laws and counterfeit policies, sometimes going against manufacturing of generics, or sometimes classifying generics as anti-counterfeit medicine, thus affecting the ability to actually win the access to medicines for people. But on the other hand, when you conflate the issues of counterfeits and generics, again, it provides a problem of access to medicines. And so those are some of the examples that we've seen across the East African region that could form a starting point for us to think through if we want to increase local manufacturing, be it for vaccines, be it for antibiotics, how then do we align this and to get the different ministries to speak to each other to ensure when an investor comes on board, they are not being hit by one thing or another to make them become progressive. Over to you, Dr. Zainab.
Thank you very much, Alan. You have very well demonstrated the need to align these laws and regulations for enhanced transparency, which actually helps an investor takes the right decision. And also the need for cooperation, like the example you gave in East Africa, that enables countries actually achieve scale. While one country can go on its own, but if you come together as a block, your numbers are higher and then you can do more. Let me thank you very much, Alan. Let me now move on to Dr. Ruth Acheng, Minister of Health, Uganda. Dr. Jane Ruth. Given the need to aggregate volumes for demand certainty, not all countries and regions in the continent can aspire to become vaccine manufacturers. How can we carefully prioritize where to manufacture? Dr. Jane? You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me recognize the Chair and the Co-Chair of the session, honorable ministers, fellow panelists and participants from across Africa. Greetings from the Pearl of Africa. It's a pity that we are not able to physically meet, but I trust you're all keeping safe, and those of you who are eligible for vaccination have received your shot. Today is an important day for Africa as we all come together to find an effective and lasting solution to expand Africa's vaccine manufacturing for health security. Vaccines are the most important single interventions for infectious diseases, and this has never been so important than in the current pandemic. Further, the COVID-19 pandemic has devastated economies and livelihoods, but has also come with immense opportunities that the continent, regions, and countries have harnessed and continue to harness. This summit is one of those opportunities. Today, Africa is not lamenting about famine or seeking donations, but investments for a common good. Talking about vaccine manufacturing, drug and vaccine development require extensive investments in infrastructure for biomedical research and discovery, good manufacturing practice, certified facilities for prototype and product manufacture, frameworks for preclinical and clinical trials, and marketing and commercialization. A key bottleneck has been low capital investment in this. Resource-intensive venture on one hand, but the will of many nations to venture into vaccine has shown that when we come together as Africa, we can fight this disease and share our success stories with the rest of the world. If Africa is to start, where should our focus be? I argue that we should focus our interest on the endemic, mostly neglected, and in some cases, emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases, a category where COVID-19 falls. I believe we can all agree that COVID-19 is here to stay. Africa happens to be the hub of most of the viruses that are of public health concern, and we are best placed to fast-track research and development of vaccines for diseases of public health concern, such as COVID-19 now. My input today is for a need to aggregate volumes of demand certainty, bearing in mind that not all countries and regions in the continent can aspire to become vaccine manufacturers. And what needs to happen to ensure regional hubs are developed, and how could regions be prioritized? The following needs to be considered. A need to have the heads of state individually embrace the idea and own the concept and the investment. The President of the Republic of Uganda and government, in the wake of COVID-19, enhanced support to local scientists, local researchers, and have offered incentives in terms of financial support and an investment-friendly environment for enablers for local innovations. Beyond the heads of states, the community of practice of scientists, investors, funders, non-government actors working together to drive the research and manufacturing initiative. Manufacturing for vaccines must be married and intertwined with research and development that harness African-grown solutions that can carry on from outside the continent. I propose a regional African technical working mechanism to be supported by respective ministers responsible for health, investment, and science and technology to form a think tank that can guide. Africa needs homegrown solutions. If a vaccine has been developed in one of the countries in Africa, all of Africa is comfortable to use our own products. Strong partnerships and collaborations to bring this to reality and create a strong future for science in Africa. An attractive approach for African governments and scientists who are developing the capacity to build the discovery component and own the intellectual property, but then hand over to other larger biotech or pharmaceuticals for larger scale production. Not every country may have a start to finish capacity, but can work together in a modular, good manufacturing practice approach. Additionally, there is need to exploit ecosystems of scientists, investors and funders, business expertise coming from both public and private sectors. I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Unmute yourself, Dr. Zainab. Sorry, unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jane Ruth Acheng, for the very well outlined intervention. Let me just very quickly, you raised a lot of very important and very good points, but I just want to learn more from you about this thinking that you have of a regional African technical working group. Can you say a little bit more about that? How will that work?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is to bring African countries together so that we can agree and think as one, guided by the different heads of states, just like we have done for many other initiatives, including the African medicines agencies and others. So it is to have one voice as Africa and think up solutions for Africa.
That's excellent. That's excellent. That is embarking on a common journey of discovery. That I like that very much, and it's very important that we should work together, research together, and then proceed to manufacture also in cooperation with each other. Dr. Kwaku Afiri, Minister of Environment and Science of Ghana. Is Dr. Kwaku with us? Okay, I see you. Often, so I'm turning my attention to you now. Often with new industries, government support can help develop new industries. What incentives are governments willing to implement in order to smooth the process for manufacturers of obtaining financing, of what kind of policies do we need to put in place? What kind of special incentives do we need to have for local manufacturing to be encouraged of vaccine in our countries? Dr.
Thank you. Good afternoon,
yes.
Your colleagues and to the moderator, and good afternoon from Ghana. Yes, incentives. First of all, let me say that COVID-19 provides opportunity for Africa and Ghana in particular to collaborate with its neighbors, particularly in the West African sub-region and Africa as a whole, to address peculiar issues. Actually, it is not a peculiar issue because Africa and Ghana, for that matter, has been dealing with a lot of diseases which are vaccine dependent. And yet these vaccines have originated from Europe and the Americans. The time has come because of the incidence of vaccine nationalism for us to look at ourselves and see what we can do for ourselves, because there are certain diseases which are vaccine dependent and yet are peculiar to Africa. Ebola essentially is one of them. So Ghana, the incentive mechanism that we put in place is that, yes, we have like several institutions which are not working in synergy. So we intend to synergize them. As I speak now, the president has commissioned a committee to look at this question of vaccines. Specifically, my predecessor, a very renowned Professor Watin, has been commissioned to assemble Ghanaian scientists and to look at the way by which we can, if as it were, manufacture vaccines locally. But the president is particularly interested in collaborating with other countries in Africa, particularly our neighbors in Nigeria, Ghana, the West African sub-region, and indeed in the continental area. Ghana is willing to give tax incentives to manufacturers who deploy in our country, who also manufacture vaccines. Indeed, we have even very good tax incentive regime in place for those who are in drug manufacturing business. So it is not new to us, but we believe that vaccine manufacturing is now very, very, very imperative because of all that I've said here before. Again, we believe that we have to get our policies aligned with those of our neighbors, particularly in the West African sub-region. And then also, because if Ghana is after, we believe that we should push vigorously that we align our policies, we align our tax regimes on vaccines in particular and other drugs and other activities which are proximal to vaccine manufacturing and other inputs, so that we can get this running and quickly. Ghana believes that we cannot do it alone because of the market and the economy of scale, and indeed because of the peculiar nature of vaccine manufacturing. It is indeed a very, very technical area. And yet we have some capacities, and we believe that we can align all these capacities so that what we have, we are doing inventory in country, so that we know the technical deficiencies that we have, so that we can solve them and collaborate and cooperate with entities from outside the shores of Ghana, so that we can embark on this venture in a very. Finally, I will say that Ghana has the capacity and has the know-how when it comes to, and I suspect that Africa, and for that matter, West Africa, we are not doing ourselves a lot of credit. We have dealt with expanded program of immunizations. Even if I may talk a little bit about Covet, if anything which is preclinical, that is from health education, from what do you call it, distribution of face masks, distribution of hand sanitizers, we have the infrastructure to do them and roll quick. When it comes to immunization, the infrastructure in place, Ghana, to do immunization is even second to than in certain countries, even in the Western countries. So yes, we have the capacity and capabilities in vaccine use, even in all the antecedents towards a comprehensive vaccine manufacture and vaccine industry. But we have to analyze the situation and get the gaps, recognize the gaps, fill in the gaps, and collaboration with our neighbors, particularly in the West African sub, get this vaccine agenda run. We are very, very grateful to the EU and the African CDC for bringing this important matter to the fore. This is what I can say.
Dr. Kwaku, for speaking to us about some of the incentives that are being availed or planned to be availed in Ghana, and then the emphasis that you made on making sure that our institutions are synergized, that there's collaboration within the region. And we have a platform to collaborate now, whether we are ready or not. The AFCFTA is here. The COVID-19 pandemic and its consequences gives us a perfect opportunity to actually walk the talk in terms of this matters of collaboration. And yes, you're right. In most of our countries, we have expanded immunization programs. So we're actually ready to do this COVID-19 vaccination because the systems are there. They have been tried. They've worked for Ebola. They've worked for polio. They've worked for the different classes of immunizations that we already undertake. So it's good to just remind us that it's not as if we're starting from ground zero, that we do have some manufacturing institutions, some manufacturing businesses in some of our countries that are producing drugs that could easily evolve into the production of vaccines as well. So thank you very much, Dr. Kwaku. I want to move on very quickly to Honorable Dr. Hala Zayed, Minister of Health of Egypt. Is Dr. Zayed with us?
Oh, sorry, I had sent you a text message. Dr. Sayed is not with us, but there is a representative of Dr. Sayed in the room.
Okay, so we can proceed with the representative?
Yep.
Who is representing?
Yes.
Who is representing Dr. Zayed?
Dr. Mohammed Hassan.
Dr. Mohammed Hassan. Okay, Dr. Mohammed Hassan, my next question is to you. This is what incentives are governments willing to implement in order to, so the same question that Dr. Kwaku addressed, in order to smooth the process for manufacturers to obtain financing. And what incentives do you have in Egypt, or are you planning in Egypt to encourage vaccine manufacturing?
Apologies once again, Dr. Zainab. Dr. Mohammed was in the room, but unfortunately has already dropped off. So perhaps it's technical issues. So maybe we could move on.
Okay, so we'll move on to Mrs. Delese Mimi Darko. Is she in the room? The Chief Executive Officer, Ghana Food and Drugs Authority. Okay, Madam, I can see you. So let me address Mr. Delese now. National regulatory agencies are responsible for ensuring that vaccines meet international standards of quality and safety. What is needed to strengthen the national regulatory authorities? And what are the ongoing efforts to strengthen the regulatory system at regional level? Mrs. Darko?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, and good afternoon to everybody. Yes, national regulatory agencies are responsible for ensuring that products, including vaccines, meet international standards. Now, when we look at vaccines, we realize that most countries in the Africa region are vaccine procuring countries. That means that we produce very few of our own vaccines. And we do the procurement with also for our standard EPI vaccines. We do this procurement with UN agencies for our routine vaccines. All the 6 WHO regulatory functions that a vaccine producing country would have to do. That means that if you're a vaccine procuring country, you're not required to do GMP inspections of the plants. You're not required to even evaluate the documentation, because the UN agency normally does all this for you. So regulatory systems in vaccine procuring countries are usually weak in the area of vaccines. And if Africa wants to start producing its own vaccines, the regulator has to be up to the mark in the 6 regulatory functions to ensure that they can support industry appropriately, to ensure that the vaccines are of the right standards. And therefore, there are certain things that regulators are already doing, but there's a lot of support that regulators in the region need. For example, the first one is legislation. So we have all different legislations that we are trying to ensure we can bring together, working under the African Medicines Harmonization, regulatory harmonization, or even working in the RECs, the regional economic communities, where we have our own harmonization, like the West Africa, the EAC, the SADC. We have tried hard to bring some of our requirements together, to harmonize some of our requirements. But I'm aware that we have the AU model law, which, if implemented across the region, would greatly help us to harmonize right from legislation down to our requirements, our guidelines, etc., to ensure that we are all working according to the same standard. Having done that, I think that a lot of the regulatory agencies in the Africa regions are resource constrained. So I think that there has to be a certain political will to ensure that there's a dedication of resources specifically for vaccine manufacture to the regulator. This will allow the regulator to build capacity in the areas that they need to be able to support vaccine manufacturing in the industry. So regulators need to have assessors who understand vaccine biology. Vaccines are not like medicines. We need to be able to build capacity in good manufacturing practice of industries, because once you start vaccine manufacturing, good manufacturing practice to ensure that they are consistently manufacturing at the right, with the right standards, it's a constant effort. We need to also build capacity in looking at, it's going to be vaccine development. We are starting from maybe fill finish to start, but very soon we intend to develop our own vaccines for the region. Therefore, regulators need to have capacity in looking at animal studies, looking at non-clinical dossiers. We need to be able to evaluate clinical dossiers according to an ICH standard, because we are not manufacturing just for Africa, but we would like to export. We would also have to build capacity in lot release. So if a vaccine is manufactured in your country, you have to be able to do lot release. So release every batch, and that means that we need capacity in testing. So that is also important. And therefore the capacity has to be built in our quality control labs and in any other research labs that exist. But even if there are other research labs, the regulator has to have the capacity to be able to inspect those laboratories. Generally, there needs to be right systems in place. So in Ghana, for example, we have a department that we call the Industrial Support Department. With such systems in place, you have committed to ensuring that you are going to support vaccine manufacturers. So are we going to have in place specific departments within regulatory authorities dedicated to supporting the vaccine manufacturing industry? Yes, I think that is a good point. We all need to have quality management systems in place. Otherwise, we would be working and just working in any haphazard way that we want. So quality management systems is something that I know a lot of African countries are working on, and those systems have to be maintained, and that costs a lot of money. If I look at the region, we have done very well so far. So within the region, the RECs at their level, so with the EAC, SADC, West Africa Medicines Regulatory Harmonization, are working very well. But all that leads to the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization, and hopefully not in the near future, we would be the African Medicines, would have the African Medicines Agency, which is the bigger picture. That looks at harmonizing all our guidelines, all our procedures to ensure that we are working well. The regulatory harmonization already has technical working groups. So you have the working group for capacity building. That needs to be supported to enable us train the individual countries or the individual countries within the region and build the capacity where they need it. We can also take advantage of what we have already. We have the regional centers of regulatory excellence all over the Africa region. We have regulatory fora like the African Vaccines Regulatory Fora. Most of us have been benchmarked, and there are 2 countries at the moment that have been benchmarked by WHO and are said to be maturity level 3. Other countries need to be able to get through that benchmark, because once you get there, you are all working at a certain standard and at a certain efficiency. So it allows us to all work in the same way and therefore pool our resources and our efforts where anyone is lacking. What I will end by saying is that regulators have worked very well with academia. I would probably say for the first time, regulators, industry, research have worked hard to hold up countries, their individual countries, during the pandemic by way of providing PPEs, by way of providing sanitizers. When we started in Ghana, we had no sanitizers manufactured locally. Now we have 1,500. We had no PPEs at all. Now we have 350. And the local industry has also been supported by the regulatory agency by giving scientific advice to be able to hold up the country in a pandemic. I believe that this momentum has to be maintained and can be maintained for vaccine manufacturing, and regulators are on hand once supported to take up this mantle. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Darko. COVID-19 did bring to our countries a lot of challenges, but again, a lot of opportunities. And I can hear Dr. Darko indicating that this is an opportunity to strengthen regulation. We already have a lot of work that has been done within the region, but there's an opportunity to do more, and especially if we're able to have a common law or a common regulation that is shared between all of our countries. Thank you very much, Dr. Darko, for that intervention. But I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the regional centers of excellence that have that are in place. Where are these centers? You said some of them are already benchmarked by the WHO, so it means we really have made some progress.
Yes, these regional centers, I think, have existed since 2015 or 2016. So for example, in Ghana, we are a Center for Excellence in Medicines Registration, in Pharmacovigilance, and in clinical trial. I know Zimbabwe, Kenya, Nigeria, we all have different centers of excellence. The idea of a center of excellence is to support the other countries in the region, build capacity. So we do this by having fellowships on an annual basis where other countries can come in and learn both theory, practical on a particular topic or a particular center. So for example, if you have a clinical trial, ARCO, which is a regional center of excellence in clinical trial, you develop capacity in other countries to be able to evaluate clinical trials, to authorize trials, and to also do good GCP inspections, good clinical practice inspections. So we build capacity with each other. It's a sort of support mechanism, it's a mentorship, and it is a capacity building mentorship system that we have in place already. And I think those should be supported to hang on and to grow and to be able to support the region better. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Darko. I've seen messages flashing that Mohammed Hassan, representing the Ministry of Health Egypt, is in the room. But I'd like to first of all move on to Mrs. Margaret Ndomondo, to the head of health, AUDA NEPAD. Are you in the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Margaret, let me ask you to please just explain a little bit more on the same issue that Mrs. Darko spoke about, on what we need to do to strengthen national regulatory authorities, and whether there are any efforts that are going on from your vantage view as AU Development Agency. What are you seeing within the region?
Thank you very much, Chair, Your Excellencies, and our fellow panel members. Allow me to first of all thank the Dr. Nkengason and the team and the Africa Vaccine Acquisition Task Team for really convening this timely meeting on vaccine manufacturing in Africa. I think Mimi has said a lot in terms of what is needed by the National Regulatory Authority. But what is key is that in recognition of the fact that most of the countries on the continent have limited capacity, and that we had fragmented regulatory frameworks across the continent, actually some 10 years back, we had to initiate an initiative that is called the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Initiative to really try and address those fragmented regulatory systems by promoting, regional medicines regulatory harmonization initiative that Mimi was alluding to. And we've seen a lot of progress when it comes to, countries increasing their capacity. And what has really helped is a situation where countries come together through the regional platform, and you find that some countries with limited capacity are benefiting from the regional platforms by, first of all, harmonizing their regulatory standards, but secondly, by jointly working together. It is through that they build the capacity, they build the trust of working together, and eventually, of course, they're able to conduct joint assessment of medicines, but also joint inspection of manufacturing sites. And so we've seen a lot of progress, and as Mimi mentioned, in the East African community, in the SADC region, in the ECOWAS region. And of course, currently we're also busy working in Central Africa and also the Horn of Africa. But I think what is key that has really helped to shape the way countries are able to improve their capacity is the structures that have been put in place, because what we believed was to ensure that there is country ownership and leadership. And therefore, experts will be convened through this regional platform to conduct these joint reviews, but also collaboration amongst the heads of agencies in the countries. We have the so-called forum for heads of agencies in all these regions that would come together and discuss issues of common interest, and eventually, of course, make decisions that will inform their national processes for making decisions. And so with this, we have seen significant improvement in terms of the timelines it takes to approve products, across countries in the continent. And I believe it's through these structures that we've built, we should be able now to really move into the vaccine manufacturing by ensuring that we continue harmonizing, of course, standards for regulation, but also assist in building capacity. We've worked with WHO, for instance, in undertaking the benchmarking of national regulatory systems across the regional economic communities on the continent. And through that, we've been able to identify gaps and assist countries to come up with institutional development plans and eventually track progress to see how they're able to address those gaps. And I believe if governments and partners are able to really invest in building those capacities, now that we're moving into vaccine manufacturing, I'm sure a lot of benefits can be accrued from that. And I think what we could do for a start, given the limitation in terms of country capacity, we could start with vaccine manufacturing countries. We have the 5 countries that are manufacturing vaccine at the moment. We could start with those, do some benchmarking, identify the gaps, and assist them in building capacity so that they can also attain WHO maturity level 3, like we've seen for other medicines. But I think what is also very, very important is to now move to a next stage. We have created these structures through the MRH governance structure, but I think what is key is to now move into having the African Medicines Agency as an AU institution that will ensure that we sustain the gain that we have accrued so far and make sure that there is long-term sustainability, but also support the financing of national medicines regulatory agencies. So I think I'll stop here for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Margaret, for expanding on the points that Dr. Darko has, Mrs. Darko has made. So let me find out if Mohammed Hassan from Egypt, Ministry of Health, is in the room. I saw some messages in the chat box saying that he's available now. Dr. Mohammed Hassan? Oh, okay, you're there. So let me ask again, what is the current state of national discussions that are going on in Egypt, and are there any common ongoing initiatives that will advance vaccine manufacturing, either in Egypt, but also within your own sub-region and the wider region?
Thank you very much, Chairman. It gives me a great honor and pleasure to join today. We have Dr. Hala Zaid, the Minister of Health and Population in Egypt, at this foremost conference that comes at a crucial moment our continent is currently living. As many COVID-19 vaccine doses has made their way to the countries across the globe to start the vaccination process, representing a major leap in our fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Egypt had the honor to share in one of the largest phase 3 clinical trials on COVID-19 vaccines, which was and distributed in many African countries. Since we started the COVID-19 National Immunization Program, we have now reached nearly 100,000 persons received the first dose of COVID-19 vaccines through a registration system and more than 200 vaccination centers, having the capacity to vaccinate more than 20 to 30,000 a day. Realizing our capabilities in local manufacturing of COVID vaccines and maximizing our capacities in the first step towards fulfillment of the essential and urgent medical needs of the continent. Egypt is one of the main vaccine in the region, and the Egyptian Ministry of Health and Population, in cooperation with WHO, went through several stages of assessing the Egyptian national company for vaccine manufacturing, named Vaxera, for reviewing the readiness and capabilities of vaccine production. The assessment process, which was carried in the terms of production capabilities, readiness of facilities, system, process for manufacturing of COVID-19 vaccine, and the WHO pre-qualification, testified that the Vaxera company has a state-of-the-art manufacturing facilities that could be utilized for the production of COVID-19 vaccine in a short period of time. The final report assured as well on the great technical capabilities, human resources, and technicalities of the institution to produce the COVID-19 vaccine, the things that qualifies it to become a central reference of for COVID-19 vaccine and biological production in the whole region, with the additional and continued support from the WHO. Egypt also stated that was regulated in association with the Egyptian Drug Authority to integrate effectively the principles of good regulatory practice and good reliance practices through the provided political commitment. All these efforts have been crowned by the joint manufacturing agreement with one of the Chinese companies to produce COVID-19 vaccines in Vaxera facility. With a capacity reaching nearly in the first step about 18 million doses, and we hope to trying to double or triple this amount in the nearest future. Finally, I would like to, on behalf of Her Excellency Dr. Hala Zaid, to reaffirm the Egyptian commitment to fully cooperate with the African Community and all the EU authorities to fulfill and implement the African vaccination strategy in order to secure and secure the COVID-19 vaccines for many African nations. We will work together hand in hand and inclusively to promote health security and achieve the most attainable access of vaccines to all the African people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid, Mr. Mohammed, you were, maybe it's my connectivity, but a lot of the times you were not clear. But if I was able to pick some of the things you were saying is the progress that has been made in Egypt in terms of COVID-19 vaccination. We're glad to be appraised of such projects in all of our countries. We're all trying in various ways and means to cover the population and accessing the vaccine. I'm sure it's not just Nigeria, but for most countries has been difficult. The numbers that we're expecting to get are very slow in coming, and that's why this discussion we're having today, this conference on being able to manufacture the vaccines that we need in Africa, is very important. The vaccine market in Africa is going to double in the next couple of years. By the year 2030, the vaccination market in Nigeria demand will double. And also African vaccination manufacturing is estimated to be about 1.3 billion US dollars. So to investors, that is a huge opportunity. And this is about 4% of the global market, and it's going to continue to grow. The major driver for Africa, of course, is the demographics. We have a young population, our populations are increasing, which means the demand will continue to rise even from where it is today. And then there's a question of access that we all need to address. There are new products that will keep coming. So today is COVID-19, tomorrow it might be malaria vaccine that we'll be looking for, or Lassa fever vaccine, or Ebola vaccine, which hasn't come out despite the very bad incidents of Ebola that we have had in the continent. The supply side for us is that African manufacturers, just for now, just less than 1% of what we consume. So there's a huge market that we need to build. So as governments and as private sector, we need to, so the businesses should tell governments, this is the incentives that we want if you want us to manufacture vaccines in the country. And government should be willing to provide fiscal incentive, monetary incentives, and trade incentives to enable businesses that have the interest and the capacity to set up manufacturing concerns, whether it is modular manufacturing concerns or very large scale concerns. We need to set out to do those in our country so that we're not, now we're on the queue. We don't even get a space on the queue. We have to try to get ourselves on the queue by coming together under the AVAT facility and to be able to queue, to just place an order for the vaccines. And of course, we are financially constrained. The physical space that we have in our countries is limited. So whichever way you look at it, we need to start manufacturing vaccines in Africa. We cannot allow a situation where we are right now that we have to depend on vaccines manufactured in developing countries, and we have to wait for when these countries take their needs, and whatever is left is what we're queuing for to get. So it's very important, and as governments and as citizens, we should look at this very critically and take the advantage of the opportunity that the COVID-19 crisis has brought on us. The opportunity for my country, for example, we had 2 molecular labs before COVID-19. Today we have up to about 60. We have had an opportunity to examine each of our 34 tertiary hospitals across the country. We have been equipping these institutions. We're providing incentives of import duty waivers for any equipment that you're bringing in for manufacturing, for raw materials, just to get the businesses to come in, to produce drugs in our country, to produce vaccines in our countries. So we need to work together under the banner of the AU. And I hope that the AU DC NEPAD will do a campaign to enable our countries adopt this African Union law, model law that has been put in place, so that we have some uniformity, and then it makes it easy for us to attract investors as a bloc, as a region. I think at this point, I want to now just pause to turn back to my colleague, Dr. Leah Tedese.
Excuse me, Honorable Dr. Zainab.
Yes.
I'm informed that Dr. Abubakar Insar is now online. Do you want to give a few minutes?
Oh, is he here? Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Abdullahi Diop-Sarr?
Yeah.
Dr. Abdullahi?
Abubakar Insar.
That's the Minister of Health Senegal, right?
On behalf of the Minister of Health Senegal, yes.
Okay, so where is Mr. Abubakar? Are you on?
Oh gosh,
in the meeting?
Somebody has just informed us that he's just dropped off again. So let's please proceed with you. Sorry, apologies.
Okay. So I don't know. Can you guide us? How much time do we have? Do we want to? Do we have enough time to give a round to the panelists to speak maybe a little bit about incentives, just incentives, because that's what the purpose of this panel is. 1 minute to each of the panelists. How much time do we have?
Yeah, so we can give each
panelist.
Yeah, we can give each panelist a minute and then wrap up. Yeah.
Okay, so
Thank you.
So in no particular order, who wants to go first? Okay, I'll call on Mr. Alan Malishi. Just one or two examples of incentives. 1 minute.
So, my 1 minute in terms of incentive, I still go back to the importance of an enabling legal and policy environment, but I think an incentive that needs to come collectively from African countries is solidarity. I think this is the time for African countries to be able to join hands together and show some level of solidarity in terms of walking the talk, in terms of agreeing to engage with either countries producing vaccines, with either pharmaceutical companies producing vaccines, because without the joint collective African solidarity, we will not be able to succeed. It is an incentive that needs to come from our leaders, and we need to be able to see that, so that after the 2 days of these talks, we actually see action that takes place, and we need to definitely use the COVID-19 situation to be able to rise and fix the health problems in Africa once and for all.
Thank you, Alan. You gave me an aha moment, because I will never have listed solidarity as an incentive, but when you said it, I saw the importance of it. So let me quickly move to Dr. Jane Ruth. One incentive from you, Dr. Jane. So maybe we've lost Dr. Jane as well to connectivity. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Could you kindly
Yes. So, Dr. Jane, I was just saying, if you can just list one important incentives that we must put in place to encourage vaccine manufacturing in Africa. Just one. We've run out of time, and you have only 1 minute.
Ma'am, one of the things that people would like to have assurance of is that the funds for these huge investments is available. And this can only be mobilized when we come together as Africa and we mobilize the resources together. Now, we have had other initiatives like this started, but many a times getting people to speak one language is not easy. And the sooner we start discussing these issues as Africa, the better. And so my emphasis is on the huge investments that we need to put into this initiative. Thank you.
So availability of resources, mobilizing resources together for investments in manufacturing. Thank you very much. That's a good one. Dr. Kwaku Apriye, you already earlier on listed some incentives, but we're asking you to list one very important one again. Dr. Kwaku? So we also lost Dr. Kwaku. That's what happens when you have the graveyard shift, which is us. When you have the last session of the day, you lose people in the process. But is Dr. Mohammed Hassan around? Do you want to speak to one incentive, one very important, so that if you don't do anything, but you must do this?
So I will talk about the well-organized governmental and the non-governmental efforts for vaccine production in Egypt. We have very good political will to get this step, mobilizing of resources, either governmental or non-governmental, the regulatory authorities that help us in analyzing and the emergency approval of the vaccines, all the efforts that have been paid for improvement of the production of the vaccination lines, and to ensure that all the human power and also all the related vaccine production issues are ready for vaccine production and its deployment either in Egypt and or in the different African countries.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed. Good political will. That's a very important one. Mobilizing resources, just as indicated by the immediate past speaker. and resources from both government and non-government. So Mrs. Darko, do you want to come back with one incentive?
Thank you very much. Probably something that may have been said already, but we have shown that as individual countries, COVID has shown us that we can do it. I believe that we should move from being individual countries and RECs, where we proved ourselves, to the bigger picture of Africa Medicines Regulatory Harmonization and the Africa Medicines Agency. We in Africa cannot allow language to become a barrier to science and public health. And therefore we need to come together, support each other, resource-wise, technology-wise, and to build a stronger Africa by way of the Africa Medicines Agency. And then we have a bigger bargaining power with the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Darko. So Africa Medicines Harmonization, that's very important. So we move together as one. And then the final minute for Mrs. Margaret Ndomondo. Mrs. Margaret.
Yeah. No, thank you, Chair. I think for me, it's more to do with, again, providing an enabling regulatory environment for investors to invest in vaccine manufacturing on the continent. I think it's very, very important that they see, the value for them to invest, that there's no hurdles when it comes to marketing the vaccines on the continent. I think we also need to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area so that we create that market, no technical barriers to trade, and therefore will be in a position to facilitate trade across the countries on the continent. And of course, eventually the African Medicines Agency.
Thank you very much. So in handing over to Dr. Lia Tedese, let me just say that, summarize by saying the key elements to drive vaccine manufacturing in Africa will be setting the agenda, which is what we're doing now, enhancing coordination between ourselves, and then access to finance, regulatory system strengthening and harmonization, demand and volume certainty, which is what we bring when we come together as one, and then talent and know-how, that is developing the capacity of our people, as well as enhancing our tools. And of course, not forgetting solidarity. Thank you very much. Dr. Lia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dr. Zainab, and for this excellent roundtable facilitation, and all the panelists for such a rich discussion, which will move us a step forward in the right direction for this big vision in vaccine manufacturing in Africa. Dr. Zainab has really highlighted many of the points that was raised, but just to emphasize, I would like to raise a few points before we conclude. A lot of key points have been raised in terms of the core aim of this session in how do we really incentivize, put the right incentives as governments and as Africa to increase vaccine manufacturing. And Alan has raised a critical point of having really the right laws and regulations and policies, not just having them in place, but also making sure that they are aligned for what we want to be on the ground. And we have, of course, gathered in such a panel not only to see what we can do as individual countries, but also collectively as a continent. So the key question of how do we collectively prioritize what to manufacture, where and how, was also addressed, especially by Honorable Dr. Jane, who has raised the key important points of ensuring that we also focus, when we talk about which vaccines, we focus on the endemic and emerging diseases, not just few vaccines, but we have to solve the endemic problems that we have as a continent as well. And also the key point of pairing manufacturers with research and development, I think, is foundational to what we envision to bring forward. And I think the key issue that was raised to harmonize and how to collectively work as Africa through a regional technical working group mechanism that can guide us how, where, and how is a key point that was raised, which can be really facilitated through the leadership of the Africa CDC and the Africa Union, and really would help us to agree and work as one entity. And in terms of incentives, many key points have been raised, and Dr. Kwaku has also raised key points on recognizing what we already have. Although it's few, we do have a lot of strengths that we can build upon within the different countries that have some, although very small, that have some manufacturing in vaccine in place, but also in the other areas that we can build the momentum on. And also we have strong immunization programs in all African countries, which shows us that we have a strong market in place to push the agenda forward. And again, the stronger regional collaboration was emphasized. And in terms of course, one key pillar, regulatory capacity, Ms. Mimi Darko has raised the key issues of having the right legislations and guidelines to have strong regulations in place in all countries, and also have the needed capacity to review, to test for quality control of vaccines to be in place. So I think this is one key point we need to emphasize. And the collaboration between the regulatory pillars and also manufacturers what we have seen as one learning through the COVID pandemic in many countries. Mimi has raised how much a lot of manufacturers in PPE sanitizers have been established in Ghana, which is a similar experience we've had in Ethiopia with a very strong collaboration of them, the industrial parks with the regulatory authorities to push for manufacturing of PPE sanitizers, and including what we were able to establish was COVID testing kits manufacturing with a strong commitment, political will. So really building upon this momentum on the way forward and bringing vaccine into the picture is something we need to capitalize on, having with this opportunity that we had faced through the COVID pandemic. And Dr. Margaret has raised the key issues of having the right structures in place, not only nationally, but also the regional platforms, especially for regulatory institutions to have forums of joint heads of agencies and harmonization in terms of decision-making process and fast tracking, which also should later emphasize that we need to have an enabling and smooth regulatory framework in all countries as a one key incentive for manufacturers to come and establish manufacturing in Africa. And eventually, of course, have the strong Africa Medicines Regulation Harmonization and the Africa Medicines Agency, and which will, of course, take us to also the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that needs to be in place in a strongly. And Dr. Mohammed has raised many key issues in terms of financing, ensuring that we have the right resources in place and also the shared really key experience of Egypt in how they had started already this manufacturing. And last but not least, there were key highlights are mentioned by all of the panelists in terms of key incentives that we need to really work on collectively and also as individual countries in terms of ensuring the available funds, strong political will for solidarity to agree to engage together and also avail the needed resources. And I would like to add also a few points on government ensuring that the necessary infrastructure is also in place to incentivize manufacturers, as well as provide tax holidays, and also the issue that we always face on foreign currency. So ensuring that availing the needed currencies are prioritized for such pharmaceutical manufacturing, especially for vaccines, I think would be critical. So overall, we have seen that this is really the time to push this agenda of vaccine manufacturing. And I believe these 2 days will come out with a strong action plan for working towards achieving this issue of growing the vaccine manufacturing in Africa, of which identifying the right incentives that need to be in place will be a core component of this action plan. And will take us forward and see the vision that was earlier in the day highlighted by Dr. Kengsong to move the percentage really significantly from the very low of 1% that we have now. And it is about political will and commitment to solve them as a country and as a continent, and push the agenda, which is a matter not only of health security, but overall national and continental security in economic and several fronts. So again, once again, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I do look forward to see the realization of these efforts in a short time. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you both moderators, Dr. Zainab and Dr. Leah. I would like to use whatever leverage I have as MC to recognize Abu Bakrin Sar from Senegal and apologize that unfortunately, because of time constraints, we might not be able to listen to you. And perhaps, say that we understand that perhaps technology had everything to do with it, because we would call you and then you'd drop off. So kindly accept my apologies for not being able to give you time to speak. And very quickly, before I hand over to Dr. John Kengasong to close today's sessions, to actually bring the day to a close, allow me to say a few words about today. First of all, today was a highly optimistic day. The day was full of optimism, and I am sure that this optimism will be carried on to tomorrow. Secondly, tomorrow we have an equally important group of speakers in several panels, and they will be covering things to do with financing, things to do with private sector role, foundations, bilateral and multilateral partners, and so on. So it's a very important day, and we'll have technocrats and private sector players from all over Africa and out of Africa to take us through the day. So without much ado, allow me to thank Dr. John Kengasong and the African Union and the African CDC&P as I welcome him to close this session. Thank you very much, and welcome, Dr. Kengasong.
Thank you, Chacha, for the excellent moderating. I think you must be very tired today moderating a whole session or the entire day's session. Yeah, but I think be assured that you are not alone. We are all here, sitting here watching, because all the sessions were extremely exciting. Let me not attempt to summarize the day, because you have done a great job, but rather focus on this last session and congratulate the co-chairs. I mean, Minister from Nigeria, Minister of Finance, Honorable Zainab Ahmed, for the wonderful moderating, Dr. Honorable Leah Tadesis for your great contribution as always, and Honorable Jane Achen from Uganda, as always. It's good to see you all on the platform. And we miss seeing you in person, as Minister Achen mentioned, but we will continue to use this platform and advance our continental agenda as much as possible. Margaret, good to see you from South Africa. We've been talking over the phone and many times, and Mimi from Ghana. Wonderful session. I think, let me just bring you some statistics for this meeting. As I mean, you have, as part of the last session, just remind you that there are still about 550 people that are hooked in here. So it's not like everybody abandoned you. I mean, almost 1,000 people are still there. So when we started this meeting early today at 1 o'clock, there were 8,400 people that registered on the Zoom line. 2,100 were on the Facebook, and 125 on YouTube. At the peak of that, the people that actually call in and were live on at some point was 2,500. So if you add all of this, it gives you about 10,000 people that have registered for this 2 days meeting. I think the reason I bring these statistics to close the meeting is really to demonstrate the strong expression of interest that is across the world and across our continent for Africa to begin to engage in the journey
what I call the long journey, but indispensable journey for local manufacturing of diagnostics on the continent. Those who heard our leadership today at the opening session perhaps wouldn't have missed one thing. They all were calling for a new public health order. President Tshisekedi, the chair of the African Union Commission, was very elaborate on that. I mean, used that over and over in his presentation, and is underpinned by the need for us to not just embark on vaccine manufacturing, but also diagnostics and pharmaceuticals, what I call the triangles for our health security. People that do not have their own freedom for vaccine manufacturing, diagnostics, and therapeutics do not guarantee their own health security. I think we have learned that over and over in the last couple of months, and we will continue to learn that lesson going forward. We also heard from Chairperson Musa Faki reiterating the need for a new public health order, and as well as President Cyril Ramaphosa. So really great leadership, great commitment at the highest level of our continent. And we look forward to continuing this conversation tomorrow. As Chacha mentioned, the tomorrow's sessions promise to be extremely exciting, with a kickoff at 1 o'clock East African time with financing. And they have great speakers there and great moderators like Dr. Donna Kaburuka, Mohamed Pate, and others. They were moving up to the private sector and made other very exciting sessions there. So, Excellencies, let me once more really thank you for your commitment by staying. For those of us who are on what I call the East Coast of Africa, for staying to 8 p.m., it's already a mark of strong commitment. And we have to take it forward. And as I said earlier today, it always looks impossible until it's done, as Nelson Mandela taught us. So we have a strong belief that we are on a journey that will take it to the end, and that this is not going to be remembered as just another conference that was organized in the midst of a COVID-19. So thank you all again once more, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. We can now leave at our own pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye,
Good
Dr.
day.
Leah. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.